I guess you've heard of my reputation. I've had my share of fooling around, but everybody needs stimulation, and mine just happens to be overtown. It's money occupation, first class psychiatry. But just once I wanna make love without taking off my clothes. Just once I wanna make love with somebody who really and truly knows. Contrary to rumor, true love, get on it too. All my lovers need stimulation, but honey babe, I think that I need you. Maybe you're the kind of person that can turn my world around. Won't you give me a little inspiration? Maybe that's what I need to make me settle down. It's an easy money occupation, but honey, one thing understand, I got more money than you could imagine anyone in the streets. But I mean, money don't make no happiness. Contrary to rumor, sugar loves get lonely too. All my loves need stimulation. Oh, but honey, babe, I think that I need you. Just once more love without taking off my clothes. Just once I wanna love somebody who knows that I got more money than you could ever see. But honey, money won't give me up all of my needs. True love, get lonely too. All my loves need stimulation. But honey, babe, I think that I need you. Contrary to rumor, true loves get lonely too. All my lovers need stimulation. But honey, babe, I think that I need you. What you gonna do, baby? What you gonna do? Hey, hey. What you gonna do, baby? What you gonna do? Do you think we're gonna have dinner sometime? Well, here we go. I'm back with chapter 22. And the title of this chapter is Perhaps Prison Can Change Me. Move this over a little bit. Daddy showed up one day during visiting hours at the rehab. He smiled and embraced me. I believed he was glad to see me. He had a surprise for me. It was Ducky. My genuine smile instantly turned into a pasted-on courtesy the moment I saw her. My emotions were brick hard during the visit. I wasn't pleased to see her this time as I had been during my first day of treatment. We didn't steal away for a passionate moment. I didn't feel led to break any program rules to be with her. The feelings between us were gone. I wondered why she had come. Daddy wanted us to talk about reconciliation. I listened to his words, but I had no intention of reconsidering the decision I'd previously made. I stood behind every word I had written to her in the letter of divorcement. It wasn't good for her and me to be together. When Daddy left us alone, I encouraged her to get herself together. I talked to her as a friend, as a loved one, because I truly did love her. For once, I had been of a sober mind for an extended period of time, and I knew how to express concern for her without falling back into our sick routine. She listened and seemed to hear me, but I knew from my own experience that it took more than just hearing a person's word to change. It was done. After her visit that day, we spoke on the telephone regarding the kids, but I never saw her again. I thought about her often. The voices and visions of her in my mind continued. We had lived a rugged life together. I didn't know if I'd ever get beyond my experiences with her. The counselors refused my stay at Teen Challenge because of the arrogant manner in which I'd left the first time I was there. The same men I was unwilling to submit to previously were still in charge. They felt that my attitude hadn't changed, and to be honest, it really hadn't. Although I'd humbled myself in their presence, my heart was still strong against a man telling me what to do. I felt their stringent religious rules were no match for the complex experiences of my past. I'd heard and done all that church stuff they spoke of, and I was very much opposed to it. If they considered that to be insincere, then yes, I was insincere. They were totally against divorce. They attempted to change my mind concerning Ducky, even to the point of contacting her by telephone. In their first and last conversation with her, she told them that we were through. She told them I was in love with April. She didn't expound on the activities coupled with our addictions, and neither did I. I wasn't going to bow down to them and their beliefs. They felt that I only wanted to enter their program again to avoid spending time behind bars. They were right to a certain degree. I did want help, but I didn't want their help. I didn't agree with their pompous religious arrogance. I told myself that the program didn't work anyway in order to ease the hurt of being rejected by them. I was transported back to the Kent County Jail in Grand Rapids to await sentencing. In March of 1990, I was ordered to do 2.5 to 20 years in prison for possession with an attempt to deliver cocaine. Authorities then transferred me from jail to Jackson State Penitentiary in Jackson, Michigan. The 6 months that I had spent in rehab and the county jail would count as served time. I couldn't believe I was on my way to one of the largest heavy surveillance correctional facilities in the world, as if I was a hardened criminal. It was somewhat symbolic, I suppose. I was hardened inside against love, which caused me to transgress the laws of the land. I wasn't a murderer or a bank robber, but I sure was a lawbreaker. Still, I felt the sentence outweighed my crime. I needed healing inside, but the world, I reasoned, needed a rest from the likes of me. I was accustomed to cold environments, so the brick wall that enclosed the facility, along with the guards with guns, didn't throw me off balance. I wasn't used to being constantly watched, though. I made up my mind that I wasn't there to make friends, but just to serve my time as a man who'd broken the law. I overheard a couple of inmates in adjacent cells talking about how they had been with my wife. How ironic that they were familiar drug dealers from Grand Rapids serving time in the same prison as me. They spoke of me being a dope fiend. They had heard I was on my way to Jackson Prison, which was how I came to be the topic of their discussion. They didn't know I was already there, listening to them just a couple of cells away. I had no choice but to sit there and take it. I listened in silence as they laughed at my situation. Ducky and I didn't write one another, nor did I try to call her. I didn't have crack cocaine to turn to behind those cold walls, and I regretted that she did. My gift of discernment was stronger than ever before because I had a clear mind, and I knew she was way in over her head with her drug habit. I didn't think I'd ever get over the incredible feeling of false pleasure drugs brought me. I still wanted to escape life in that manner, but I loathed what the addiction had done to my family. I turned elsewhere since I couldn't get a fix. I cried out to God, and He met me there in my solitude. When I got up the next morning and entered the chow hall for breakfast, the young men who had been in conversation about me the night before were stunned to see me. I laughed inside at the looks on their faces. They acted as though they'd seen a man who had risen from the dead. I didn't comment on what I heard. We spoke. I ate my meal, and I walked back to my cell with integrity. I exercised when I went to prison in order to get in shape and to work off stress. I was doing push-ups in my cell on the east side of quarantine one evening, and the men on the west side were showering, 8 at a time. I was within their view, and several of them shouted out to me while grabbing their genitals. You know you want some of this, boy, and I can't wait until I see you out in the yard, they hollered. I'm doing life, and I'm going to make you my wife. I continued my workout, trying to block out their comments. The things they said forced my mind to think back on the perversion that Ducky and I had participated in. Thoughts of them having sex with her flooded my mind. When I got out on the yard the next day and stood in line for a turn to use the telephone to call April, one of the men from the shower came up to me. For a moment, I tensed up. He was a big man, and I remembered the vulgar things he and his friends had said to me. He asked if it was true that I was a DEBARGE and that I had been in Switch. When I confirmed his suspicions, we formally introduced ourselves, and he proceeded to rattle off his favorite Switch songs. He considered me to be all right since he was from Detroit, too. He requested that I sing They'll Never Be. Only got a few bars out before he excitedly asked me to stay put while he phoned his wife, who was an even bigger fan than he was. He wondered if I would speak with her. I agreed, and she asked me to autograph something and give it to her husband to send to her. She also wanted me to sing her favorite song, There'll Never Be. When I started singing, he began dancing, and the rest of his shower buddies gathered around to see what was going on. He told everyone who I was. They were all fans of DeBarge, Chico DeBarge, and Switch. I entertained their conversation for a few moments. Some of them spoke of my wife, stating that she was fine and that they knew her. I casually blew it off, explaining to them that she was in my past and I now had a new lady in my life. I proudly showed them the picture of April. They gathered around to look, calling her a pretty yellow girl. They considered me to be their homie after all of that, and they left me alone other than casual conversation. There were a lot of men coming into the prison from Detroit. I was spending a lot of my time in prayer and reading my Bible. The inmates found talking to me to be a source of encouragement. Those who were facing strong cases against them and getting into trouble while doing their time asked me to pray for them and with them. I found a bit of contentment in God using me that way. It helped me endure the time away from April and my children. Above all else, I wanted to become stable so I wouldn't give in to temptation anymore. Prison is a difficult time for anybody. It was for me because of the structure. It had always been hard for me to walk the straight and narrow. Childhood had placed in me a hatred for authority and stubbornness toward any form of organization because those who had governed my life had wounded me. As a teen, I took my bad behavior lightly, never thinking I would one day be behind bars. I used to laugh at adult comments that my rebellious behavior would drag me to prison, cockily convinced that they were just old folks out of touch with reality. Yet there I sat in that lonely cell with their words returning to me as if just spoken the day before. My heart flooded at realizing that what they said had become reality. I realized that I realized then that words have power to form an image in a person's mind. I wondered, had those same adults chosen to speak positive things into my life, would it have come to pass likewise, or at least given me an esteem to reach towards? Pardon me. Be right back. I had perceived discipline to be loveless, a strict blockade to pleasure that I had to fight back against. In actuality, obeying rules was just what I needed in order to make something good out of my life. Daddy's way wasn't about rules, but abuse. I was learning the difference in a very irritating manner. A prison sentence. God was at work within the DeBarge family, enforcing his official position as judge. In January of 1989, Bobby and Chico were sentenced to 5 years in prison for participation in a drug conspiracy case. They were each charged for their part in plotting the transportation of a kilogram of cocaine through U.S. airways. I felt that my brothers had been set up and taken advantage of by the judicial system. I believe they came down hard on us every chance they got for no reason at all, just like Daddy had done. I always felt that way anytime any of us got into trouble, like there was a conspiracy to degrade the DeBarge name. I learned to justify myself in all situations with an I didn't do anything wrong attitude. Now, locked up for the fourth time, I sat in my cell and thought for a moment about how stupid that sounded, as if the law had nothing better to do than to chase down me and my brothers. Right then, I threw my negative thinking about the law down to the ground and stomped it to death with the truth. Through quiet time alone in my cell, I came to understand that God was simply trying to get our attention since we didn't bother to listen to Him at any other time. He wanted to bring us to a point of submission and repentance. We had committed crimes, really. I was in the wrong. My brothers had been in the wrong too. For that specific reason, we were behind bars, hopefully receiving correction. I spent 59 days in Jackson before being transported to Cassidy Lake in Chelsea, Michigan, which was where I completed the rest of my actual prison time. My life then became stiffly structured. The atmosphere was different than in Jackson, which had been a bit more casual. Upon waking each day, I prayed and then carried out the facility routine of a shower, chow, yard walk, and lockdown. I didn't enjoy being confined, yet I had to admit it was somewhat of a comfort knowing what to expect from moment to moment. My life had been filled with sporadic occurrences for as far back as I remembered, especially once I had become a drug addict. Daily structure felt kind of good. Chelsea, like Jackson, was filled with young boys from Detroit who were doing time for selling drugs. They were rowdy. My private cell made for a pleasant atmosphere of worship. Once inside my assigned space, I was able to continue my blossoming fellowship with God. There I asked God to help me so that drugs and sex would no longer control me. I felt the peace of God upon me and found the rest in the Word. While other inmates were jesting, I sat in silence, listening to my own thoughts, anticipating a completion of the healing process that I felt God had begun. I found favor with the inmates and staff. Pardon me. I'm sorry about that. Um, okay. I found favor with the inmates and staff. All of them were kind to me. I wanted to take credit for that being the name I'd made for myself in the music industry, but I gave it to God. He was looking out for me. It was His character in me that received a nod from others. There was only one instance in which I was threatened with an altercation. I made a comment that a Muslim brother didn't like me and he wanted to fight me. I hadn't meant any harm. I walked away from the situation because that wasn't how I wanted to spend my time, looking over my shoulder or being on guard whenever he came around. I didn't need that kind of stress on me while doing time. I went to prison expecting to be alone because of all the wrong I'd done. I expected no support whatsoever since I burned down every bridge that led to my heart. No one visited me the whole time, not even April. I understood that she was busy with the kids and her parents weren't really receptive of us being together. Besides that, she didn't have a car. I had hoped Mama might bring her to see me. I wasn't surprised when no one sent me a dime either. I was allowed to work within the system to earn $1 per day, which didn't seem like much money at all, but it did cover my personal necessities. Sorrow was so slowly replaced with joy, even through the ones even though the ones I loved seemed so distant to me. The very one I had turned away from so many times before was the only one there for me behind those cold, gloomy prison walls. It was God who comforted me when it appeared that no one cared. He ministered to me in the darkness and fed me with knowledge of Him. I felt Him with me, and I finally knew He loved me if no one else ever did. I had lived a dangerous life before being sent to prison. I was involved with drug use and drug dealers, either of which could have killed me at any time. Intervention by the judicial system had saved me, and I needed to be grateful. Prison was causing me to believe that I could be satisfied with whatever came my way. That was the only way to make it through the time anyway. I was unsure of what I would face in life once my sentence was complete, so I needed to prepare within. As I realized that prison was actually a good thing for someone like me, a load of bitterness lifted from the innermost places of my heart. To fight any longer in my mind against authority was to openly combat with God who had allowed it in the first place. I had read in my Bible that He set up systems of justice. Opposing Him was a fight I'd never win. As I sat one day in my cell and thought about that, I began to cry. I realized I actually fallen into the hands of someone who loved me without measure, not prison. Wait. I realized I'd actually fallen into the hands of someone who loves me without measure, not prison. Love and correction. I realized they were supposed to go hand in hand. Daddy just hadn't done things properly. I forgave him during my prison time. I didn't know that I'd ever understand why he treated me the way he did, but I forgave him. It really didn't matter. I was over. It was over, and I needed to get on with my life. I didn't know if I'd ever tell him about how the abuse affected me. I shouldn't have had to. My unsettled life was the obvious outcome. If he didn't already know, nothing I said would make him understand. Chapter 23. Wanting April in my future. I was amazed at the thoughts that came back to me as I sat day after day in my cell. Situations and people I had completely put out of my mind stood in line for attention. I thought about my childhood dog, Ginger. I had a childhood dog, Ginger. It was adoption. Songs my brothers and Bunny and I used to sing when Mama would take us around to neighborhood churches as a vocal group, and how Mama used to go off on me when I'd embarrass her by telling people we had holes in our walls. I also thought about the many mistakes I'd made. I wanted to learn from each of them if I still could. I'd hurt a lot of people and I wanted to somehow make amends. There were so many things I was ashamed of and wanted erased from my memory completely. What was there to learn from shame? It just made me feel bad. There were a lot of misunderstandings in my memory also. I was ready for every thought to be neatly arranged in its proper place so I could live an orderly life when I got out of prison. I thought a lot about April. I wondered if I'd extinguished her fire for life with my problems. She had two kids and seemed to have given up on her dreams. I encouraged her when we talked on the phone. I didn't want to see her do nothing with her life because of things I'd done and said in the past. She had many talents like her father. Everyone had urged her to leave me alone for her own good. There was even a period of time I told her the same. By that time, though, she was in love with me and wasn't going anywhere. I didn't know what she saw in me. I honestly couldn't see what had kept her with me. Whatever it was, I was grateful for it. She had stayed by my side when I really needed her. April's parents didn't like me one bit, and I knew the reasons why. I hoped once I got out and did right by her that they would grow to love me. They'd never beat her and had raised her in a way so different from me. I wanted them to accept me into their normal world. April liked me, and that was what mattered. She was fun to be around, even though she was really quiet around my friends. When I started taking her around my family, she barely said a word. In fact, she got along better and carried on more conversation with my young nieces and nephews than she did the adults around her. As I had gotten to know her over time, I had been able to see that she had a temper and a smart mouth. She had often reminded me of the bratty kids I seen in movies who threw tantrums when they didn't get their way. She had a side of rage she kept hidden. She didn't expose all her mind like I did for the whole world to see. She took a lot when it came to putting up with me, but when she snapped, that was it. She would talk crazy to me and throw things at me like shoes, television remotes, and punches. She even threw a keyboard amp at me once. My memory bore record of having hurt April. I didn't desire access to this storehouse of thoughts. God was leading me there, so back down memory lane I went. I didn't just do a thing or two to make her upset. This was an ongoing persecution of her that pretty much began day one at Andrew's house. She was one of those extremely caring individuals who couldn't help but reach out to someone in need. I took and took from her without giving back, and that was wrong. I was in a lot of pain when I first met her, and I couldn't seem to keep my troubles from spilling over into her life. To misuse her wasn't my intent, but after what I've been through and with what I was going through, it was inevitable that I would make her life miserable. April was young and attractive. She had a good personality and was sweet. She could have been with someone her own age that wasn't suffering from issues such as mine. Yet she chose to be supportive of me. I paid her charitableness with cruel and selfish acts. I knew she was naive, and I had taken advantage of her. She trusted me, not realizing that a man dependent on drugs wasn't trustworthy. I manipulated her in order to get money from her to support my habit, or I'd just outright take it from her. On two different occasions, when Ducky came back into my life, I had pushed April aside. I wrecked her cars or took her keys from her so I could drive myself to places she didn't want to take me. I had even tried to get her to participate in sex swaps so I could watch. Good grief. I was puzzled as I sat in my cell in this place of thought. April had never complained about me hurting her. Not once had she told me how she felt about me or the things I'd done. She had gotten on to me, though, about drugs and drinking. Perhaps she kind of knew her place behind my wife. Being raised as she was, I knew that she felt a lot of guilt by being involved with me without being married to me. Still, I'd never seen her shed a tear. I had cried to her on more than one occasion. She seemed so strong, like nothing had ever bothered her. That was how she became my wall of strength. She was confident and secure, or so I thought. Yet God was now showing me the truth about what I had and hadn't seen. I was selfish. I had been too busy chasing that next high to see that not only was I hurting her, but she was wounded before she'd even met me. Her tolerance for pain was high, as if I could do nothing so hurtful to make her leave me because she'd already been deeply hurt. Like me, she hid her pain only in a different way. Even while in prison, she was still strong. She kept in touch by writing every day and received my phone calls via three-way from either Mama or Peaches. With a sober mind, I came to appreciate her companionship. I made up my mind that I was going to show her kindness in return for having stuck by me when I really needed someone. I was also going to let her know she could talk to me about anything. Her life had seemed so picture perfect, and I wanted to know who and what had hurt her. April's brother, Mark, passed away while I was doing time. I was saddened by his death and even gloomier that I couldn't be there to wrap my arms around her in comfort. She sent me his obituary and she shared with me the details of his passing and funeral. Craig Tyson, a close friend of my family and hers and fellow musician, had dedicated a song to Mark during a Christmas concert she had attended. She told me all those things, but she didn't express to me how much it hurt to lose her brother. They were close, so I knew it must have been painful. She didn't break down on the phone while talking to me about him. I realized that I needed to hear April cry. I wanted her to feel comfortable talking to me about things that bothered her. She didn't always have to be strong, did she? I wanted to be able to have a chance to give in our relationship by being there for her. I wanted her to know I was there for her no matter what. The messy bed I made became extremely uncomfortable to sleep in when I discerned that April was involved with someone else. I woke up one morning and just knew. When her everyday letters became sporadic, I was convinced. Then there was news at 11. Mama. Nothing happened in the family without her knowing about it and spreading the word. She always kept me abreast of everything when I called. She confirmed my bad vibes, and so did Bunny. April had a job playing piano for the local theater, and Bunny told me a young man in the play for which she was playing was hanging around her. That was all Bunny said, but Mama wasn't so vague. Mama said April had a new man and that I had another ducky on my hands. What? I'm sorry. Let me read that again. Then there was news at 11. Mama. Nothing happened in the family without her knowing about it and spreading the word. She always kept me abreast of everything when I called. She confirmed my bad vibes, and so did Bunny. April had a job playing piano for the local theater, and Bunny told me a young man in the play for which she was playing was hanging around her. That was all Bunny said, but Mama wasn't so vague. Mama said April had a new man and that I had another ducky on my hands. What? Was she doing drugs too? I called April, as usual, during my limited phone time and questioned her. Mama probably listened in on this particular call instead of setting the phone down so I could talk to April in private. I asked her if there was someone new in her life. She told me there wasn't. I asked her about the guy in the play. She responded that the guy Mom and Bunny spoke of was a friend. Oh no, I thought. I too had once been only a friend to April, which eventually led to her becoming my woman. She was the kind of friend a guy really couldn't have as a friend because he'd end up falling for her. I feared her falling for someone else. After all I'd put her through, I thought for sure she was gearing up to get me back by being with someone else. After all, that was how I handled my rejections. Based on what I knew from my family and what I knew from Ducky lying to me, I braced myself for what I assumed would be a breakup of our relationship. I felt like now was a good time to start giving to her. I didn't want to appear jealous. I spoke to her out of sincere concern for her, for us, and for us, not simply out of fear for losing her. My words, however, came out all wrong. The conversation didn't go well at all. I belittled her by saying that no man wanted her with two children by me, and that if anyone was trying to be with her, it was for sex, not a relationship. I told her that this friend was just around her for his own ego boost because she was my woman and I was a DEBARGE, insinuating that she had nothing of her own to offer someone. Damn. I told her that whoever this guy was, clearly he was nobody to be trying to gain credit to his name by being with her since everyone knew she belonged to me. I came at her all wrong. I didn't know how to talk to her about a matter like this. She seemed to have gotten touchy lately anyway in recent conversations, perhaps due to guilt. Before my comments were complete, excuse me, be right back. Before my comments were complete, that bratty girl with the smart mouth presented herself from behind the Christian forefront. And I threw that in there too. You're supposed to be a Christian. Before I knew it, her voice had gotten loud and her statements had become rude. The bottom line was that she didn't like being told what to do, especially by me, a married man. She told me off and hung up on me. I had overlooked what she might be going through. April didn't even know that I loved her. I hadn't done anything to show her I wanted her in my life. It was always about Tommy. I selfishly focused on the illusion of her trying to hurt me instead of wondering if she had perhaps found someone that she thought truly cared about her. Or maybe she was lonely and enjoyed someone spending time with her. Maybe she was trying to erase me from her heart, thinking that I still had a commitment to my wife. I thought about all those things over the next couple of weeks while she was refusing my phone calls. She stopped writing to me completely. I didn't blame her. I had said some pretty rude things, and she was probably enjoying her new friend and was forgetting all about me. My quiet time with God was all that kept my sanity. I suddenly realized that April had a communication problem all along. I just hadn't seen it before because I was high. Instead of talking things through, she shut down. That was why she hadn't talked to me about how I'd hurt her. She built walls around herself when hurtful situations arose. I suddenly expected nothing more from her than injury if she wasn't going to grow beyond that old way of communication. I rationalized that April, having loved me, had been too good to be true in order to prepare myself for her rejecting me totally. I kept trying to call her during my phone time, hoping she would answer, and she eventually did. Feeling that she'd only spared my feelings in our last conversation because of my prison situation. I told her she didn't I told her she needed to choose between him and me. I reassured her that I would be okay with either decision. My mind casually said, "Oh well." In my heart, though, I desperately wanted her to hold on to me forever. After a few more days of phone calls, April softened. She confessed to me that she had cheated on me during the time she wasn't taking my phone calls. She had already been spending too much time with this guy, and she was vulnerable. The things I said to her had finally pushed her over the edge. She didn't understand my gift of discernment, that when I'd spoken those words of caution to her, I had already seen what would happen. She thought herself to be too strong to be tempted. I reminded her that she was just a babe as a Christian and that she shouldn't put more confidence in her flesh than it was capable of handling. She was disappointed in herself for what she had done. Forming a friendship with a man while on bad terms with me wasn't a wise move. The young man had made himself out to be so much more of a man than me. She found him to be a liar, though, when they got down to business. If she was going to be with someone else, he was going to have to outdo me in bed. I was a hard act to follow in her life, and I taught her well. He had boasted to her that I was chicken and he was steak, which had aroused her interest. When she found out that it wasn't really the case, she dropped him like a hot potato. I was the man she knew and wanted, which was a blessing on my part. Otherwise, I would have been doing my time without her. I wanted to know every detail. A flashback of my life with Ducky made me wish I could have watched, but I didn't tell her that. The heck is wrong with him? I want to know if she enjoyed him more than me and if they'd been involved on a regular basis. She entertained my questions momentarily and then she said she was done talking about it because it was now something in her past. I accepted April's apology. It felt good to forgive her. That was part of the kindness that I wanted to show her. I didn't want to punish her for what she'd done. I'd done so much worse to her. Honestly, honesty felt good. Her telling me the truth proved to be the intimacy that I had longed for in a relationship with a woman. I prayed that she would always keep that type of attitude with me. In the back of my mind, I wondered what me and Ducky's relationship would have been like if she had only told me the truth. All the lying was probably what had kept us both bound to drugs. April's letters resumed and continued throughout the remainder of my time in prison. She used different colored pens that brightened my day. She wrote about God and the kids, and she would tell me she loved me. Thankful for a second chance, I cherished every word she wrote to me. I had wished that she would surprise me with a visit. I couldn't wait to see her again. All right, that's chapter 22 and 23. Chapter 24 is a pretty, yeah, it's a long chapter, and I won't be able to read all of it. So I will have to conclude this session at this time. And I shall be back again tomorrow night, hopefully, reading. All right. Thank you for tuning in. And you all have a great day. But not before I play a pretty song. Coming right up. Ads are a pain in the butt. Used to spend my nights out in the ballroom. Liquor was the only love I'd known. But you rescued me from reaching for the bottom and brought me back, being too far gone. You're as smooth as Tennessee whiskey. You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. And honey, I stay strong on your love all the time. I've looked for love in all the same old places. Found the bottom of the bottle's always dry. But when you pulled out your heart, I didn't waste it. 'Cause there's nothing like your love to get me high. And you're as smooth as Tennessee whiskey. You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. And honey, I stay strong on your love all the time. Tennessee whiskey. You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. And honey, I stay strong
on your love all the time. Oh, that's this Tennessee whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, Tennessee whiskey. Oh, that's Tennessee whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, Tennessee whiskey.